Hello, dear SUSNANO colleagues. I'd like to welcome you to Module 2 of my training. This time around, I'm going to be talking about, again, the project life cycle, as I had done in Module 1. However, it's going to be very, very much focused on the project life cycle in the context of Horizon Europe. And as you will hopefully recall from Module 1, with the project life cycle in the context of EU projects, we said there were four sort of phases: initiation phase, planning phase, execution and control phase, and then closing phase. So with today's training on Module 2, we're going to focus on the initiation phase and the planning phase, and looking very, very, as I say, very closely at Horizon Europe and how it works for that. So I'm going to be giving lots of examples from past proposals and projects that I've had in the context of Horizon Europe and its predecessor, Horizon 2020. Okay, so look, this is the agenda for Module 2. It's pretty extensive. So in fact, what I'll do is I'll go through the initiation phase, and then we'll take a break. And then later on, I'll come back and in a new video, a separate video, I'll be talking about the planning phase. So anyway, for the initiation phase, for now, we're going to be covering how to register to the EU Funding and Tenders portal. We're going to talk about identifying Horizon Europe calls for proposals, how to understand call conditions, how to go about investigating existing related Horizon Europe projects in a particular research field, how to develop a project charter aligned with EU priorities, which hopefully you recall we already talked about in the preceding module. And then lastly, we're going to say some words about how to go about building a consortium. So to the right, you see this figure, this arrow. You will hopefully recall it from yesterday, from the training on Module 1. Just to add, these phases, how to say, it's not like when you transfer from one phase to another, it's not sort of binary, it's not black and white. It's not like you go from one day, I'm in the initiation phase, and now I'm in the planning phase. Often the boundaries between these phases are rather blurred, and you may in actual fact find yourself sort of working on initiation phase activities at the same time as planning phase activities. Likewise, assuming you win a project and you're running a project, there is a rather, at the end of the project, it's a bit of a blurred line between what is execution and control phase activities and closing phase. I think the point I just want to get across is, not to worry about this. This is just a fact of life. Okay, so let's get started now with the initiation phase. As I say, the planning phase, that will be in a separate video. So the first things to sort of talk about in the context of initiation phase, about how to register as a user on the EU Funding and Tenders portal. Now, I'm sure many of you have already done that, and that's great if you have. But those of you who haven't, I absolutely, I strongly recommend you do it. You have to be registered if you want to be able to participate in sort of preparing proposals for Horizon Europe. But above and beyond that, it's a very good thing to be registered, because there's things like you can, through the portal, you can also register yourself as an evaluator of Horizon Europe proposals. And also you can access extra information about projects and details about the program. So So anyway, the way to do it, you need to go to this website, EU Funding and Tenders Portal. The QR code on the left will take you directly there. Otherwise, if you do a Google search on the term EU Funding and Tenders Portal, you will find it. Assuming you land on this sort of homepage, landing page here, in the top right-hand corner, you should see a button say signing in. It's the one I've highlighted with a sort of yellow circle around it. Click on that, and that will then take you to where you can register your username and password to access this portal. So that's a basic essential step if you haven't already done it. Some words again about the Horizon Europe program. This is already mentioned a bit in Module 1. For the sake of repetition, but it's always good to know. So the program, Horizon Europe, has this vast budget of 95.5 billion euros. It started in 2021 and will run to 2027. All these programs from the EU sort of run for 7-year cycles. The current one, the way it's structured, this figure, which is taking up much of the screen, this shows the sort of structure of these pillars. Pillar 1, excellent science. Pillar 2, global challenges and European industrial competitiveness. And Pillar 3, innovative Europe. And then, not to forget, especially very important for the likes of a widening country such as Albania, you have at the bottom, running horizontally, this sub-program called Widening Participation and Strengthening the European Research Area, which is a part of the program specifically aimed at, as I say, widening countries such as Albania and many, say, Central Eastern European countries and countries bordering with the EU. So there are different pillars, different areas. The thing to do is to identify which particular sub-program is of interest for you. It might be health, it might be ICT, agriculture related, who knows. But for whatever area it is, or which pillar or particular program, you need to get hold of a copy of the current valid work program. And this is a comment that's written at the bottom here. Make sure to download the latest Horizon Europe work programs for the area you're interested in. So how can you go about doing that? Well, the Commission has a particular website where these work programs for Horizon Europe are stored. What you see here on this screen are 2 screenshots. There's one on the left and one on the right. And the QR code right in the center of the picture, this will take you to the web page on the left. Assuming you go to this web page, there's a button. I've highlighted it in yellow on the left. It says View Available Work Program. So if you click on that, that will then take you to another web page, which is shown by the screenshot on the right. This is where all these work programs are kept. So you can just about see on the screenshot I've got there. Towards the bottom, there's a mention about Horizon Europe Work Programme 2023 to 2024, Cluster 1. If Cluster 1 under the Pillar 2 part of the program was of interest to you, that's where you could go and click and download. So yeah, so make sure you download the latest work programs. Assuming you've downloaded a work program, let's imagine, for argument's sake, it was the Maria Skłodowska-Curie actions, which are under Pillar 1. If this was the area you were interested in, download the work program, and then, because these work program documents are often very large, sometimes several hundred pages in length, to try and find relatively quickly if there's something of interest to yourself, well, of course, you can look at the table of contents for the document. Another approach is to do a keyword search on the text. especially if you're dealing, say, with if you've got a work program for one of the clusters on the pillar 2, that may be the most effective way for you to quickly try to identify any calls of interest to yourself. Now, assuming you do, and you found the particular pages, the important things you need to check are the conditions for the call. In brackets, I've written here, the call deadline, of course, is vital to know that. But you'll also want to investigate what it says about budgets, what the EU contribution per proposal is, in other words, the grants that will be made available per funded project. But also when you're reading the work program and you're looking at a particular call, read also the other parts of the call text where it talks about expected outcome and scope. These will be essential for you to become very familiar with. So this is one route to sort of find out about calls through work programs. Another way you can do it is sort of directly through the EU funding and tenders portal. So this page I've got here, you can access it through the QR code that I've got here on the left. In the EU funding and tenders portal, you can check not only currently open Horizon Europe calls, but also often forthcoming calls which have not yet been officially opened, or which haven't yet officially been opened. There are often also details are available. Now, if you land on this EU funding and tenders portal, what you need to do is you can just about see at the top of this screenshot, there's a button highlighted in sort of an orange color, funding. You would need to click on that. That'll then produce a drop-down menu. In that drop-down menu, you would click on calls for proposals. Assuming you do that, then you will see this specific kind of page, where all the currently open, forthcoming calls are listed. Of course, you might end up with literally hundreds of different calls listed. So how can you go about sort of narrowing your search? Well, you have these filters that you can just about see on the left of the screenshot. So look, I would encourage you to sort of go into those filters and make adjustments specific, or maybe add keyword terms, and or if you know a specific call for proposals, call identifier, this kind of thing, you can put those into the filters, and that will help you hone in on the particular call. So yeah, so the EU funding and tenders portal is one approach. Another way you can find out information about calls is to get in contact with what are called the national contact points for Horizon Europe. So for all EU member states and also countries associated to Horizon Europe, such as Albania, they will have a team of experts who are specialized and knowledgeable about the different sub-programs of Horizon Europe. So what I've done, and these national contact points, you can again find out about them through the EU funding and tenders portal. The QR code here on the left, if you click on that, that will take you directly to the listing of national contact points for Albania. So with the filters, you can just about see in the screenshot, I adjusted those. So I'm just looking at the ones for Albania. In fact, it would appear there's something like 17 different national contact points for sub-programs like European Institute of Innovation and Technology. I believe that appears under Pillar 3. There's a national contact point for digital industry and space. This is Cluster 4 under Pillar 2 of the Horizon Europe program, and so forth. It's, how to say, it's very good to sort of foster good relations with your national contact points, because they will often have access to early information about calls. They may have, for example, draft work programs, which potentially they might be able to share with you. or they may have specific background information about um, what was the thinking, what were the discussions, what were the priorities that went into deciding a particular call for proposals. Yes. Also, national contact points can be very helpful if you're trying to form a consortium, because like the national contact points for Albania, no doubt they'll be networked with national contact points from across the EU. So if you need some help with uh, forming a consortium, maybe you want a particular partner from Luxembourg or France or whoever, they can perhaps help facilitate contacts with a national contact point in France or Luxembourg, and help you to find those partners. So that's another recommendation. And then another recommendation, this is really for people who who are really invested in the Horizon Europe program, who really want to sort of follow it very closely, from year to year, and so forth. So look, there's this website called Science Business, which I believe I think it's free to register to. The QR code on the left will take you there. This website, one of the nice things they've done in recent years is they've made available copies of draft work programs for Horizon Europe. So before final official Horizon Europe work programs are published, on which I should stress, of course, when it comes to actually writing a proposal, preparing a proposal, it's the official ones you must refer to. However, those official ones, they will be discussed for quite considerable length, maybe half a year, quite possibly longer, the preparation of them. So, and sometimes when they get officially published, there may be only a few months to go before the actual first calls, the deadlines appear, which may not seem like so much time. So if you're really invested, you're really interested in these programs, you're always interested to try to get access to draft earlier copies to see what's on the horizon, what's coming up. And as I say, this Science Business website, this seems to be a good access point to get hold of those. So I now move on to talk a bit about sort of the conditions around sort of Horizon Europe calls. And what I need to explain to you about is the difference. There's two things here. I need to talk to you about what the different project types, and consequently, what's the different kind of funding. So in this slide here, you see a table. In the first column, it mentions project type. So it's mentioning research and innovation actions, coordination support actions, and then below that, there's a row that says innovation actions regular rate, and below that, a row that says innovation actions rate for non-profit organizations. Now, before I step in and talk about how each of those different types of action, those different project types are funded, let's clarify what do we mean by these terms: research, innovation action, coordination, support action, and innovation action. And that's these definitions, if you like, that's at the bottom of the screen. So the first one, research and innovation action, or RIA for short. So these are collaborative projects funding research activities upstream of a commercial product or service. In what are called technology readiness levels, which I'll be explaining shortly in another slide, the TRL levels for these kinds of projects are typically, they lie somewhere between TRL level 2 and TRL level 6. In these kinds of projects, they enable the exploration of new technologies, methods, products, or improvement of existing ones. Sorry about to sneeze. excuse me, innovation actions, or IAs for short, these are also collaborative projects funding research, but the research activities are much closer to a commercial product or service. In terms of technology readiness levels, typically these would be, say, projects starting with TRL level perhaps 6 and maybe ending with TRL level 8 or something of that sort of nature. And then lastly, coordination support actions, or CSAs. So CSAs, they're not actual collaborative research projects themselves. Instead, they're about improving cooperation to strengthen the European research area. This might be through some sort of cooperation activities on standardization, dissemination, awareness raising, communication and networking activities, policy dialogues, mutual learning or studies. I should add, for example, the SUSNANO project is a CSA. So that's a word about the definitions of these three different types of action. Let's now try to understand how the funding of these different actions works. So, well, it turns out that for both research and innovation actions, RIA, as well as coordination support actions, CSA, the funding in essence is the same. So we have in these projects what are known as direct costs. So direct costs would be any kind of costs directly incurred in order to implement the action. The first one, of course, would be personnel costs, salary costs, in other words. But direct costs could also be, in the case of an RIA, it might be research consumables, chemicals, materials. In the case of both RIA and also CSA, there'll probably be travel costs to go to consortium meetings, for example. These will be considered direct costs. The Commission, though, also says, well, look, but we know that organizations, you have overheads. You have, for example, you'll be running your organization from some offices or some laboratories. There are costs associated with those, with heating, electricity, water, rents, administrative support staff, and so forth. Typically, they're called overheads, but we understand that it gets very complicated trying to account for those and allocate them to a project. So instead, the Commission says, look, to make life easier, for every euro of direct cost, we're going to give you 25% in addition to cover those sorts of overheads. So reading right across this first row, if you had 100 euros of direct costs, be it for personnel or equipment or whatever, the Commission will also give you a further 25 euros for indirect costs. So your total costs, adding the two together, 100 plus 25 gives you 125. For RIA and CSA, the Commission will fund at 100%. So in other words, they will fund 100% of your total costs. And that's therefore for every 100 euros of direct costs, you're going to end up with a grant amount of 125. So that's RIA and CSA. But if we're talking now about innovation actions, so within innovation actions, there's what's called the regular rates. That's in the middle row, and then the bottom you see the rates for non-profit organizations. So the regular rate, this is the rate that applies to companies. It could be startup companies, it could be small to medium-sized enterprises, they could be large enterprises, any kind of private company, they'll be eligible for the regular rate. On the other hand, the row at the bottom, rate for non-profit organizations, it's exactly as it says for non-profit. So it'll be for public, it could be for universities, it could be for public research organizations, it could be for some sort of not-for-profit NGO. They all qualify for this other rate. But let's consider the regular rate. So in other words, for private companies. So for every 100 euros of direct costs, the Commission says, okay, we again provide 25%, in other words, 25 euros of indirect costs. So that will give a total cost of 125. But at this point, the funding rate we're going to provide is 70%, not 100%. And this 70%, this is applied to the total cost. So 70% of 125, this gives you 87.50 euros. So reading from start straight to end, for every 100 euros of direct costs in an innovation action, for example, for a private company, they will get a grant of 87.50 cents. On the other hand, innovation actions for all these non-profit, it's 100% funded. So for every 100 euros of direct costs, they will get a grant of 125 euros. So hopefully that's clear. Now, stepping out for a moment, you might be asking, so why are there these different rates? Well, in sort of simple terms, we have to understand with research and innovation actions is they're very much early in the sort of stage of technology development. And so there's more risk associated with those. And therefore the sort of underlying philosophy, the underlying thinking is, if there's more risk, there needs to be some sort of more incentive to nurture and encourage the risk, taking that risk for a private company, for an organization. On the other hand, when you're dealing with, for example, innovation actions, where the technology development is much more closer to commercialization, there's less risk at this point because the basic science, the basic development, concept development, that's been done. And therefore, since there's less risk, there's less need to provide a stimulus and incentive, and therefore the funding rate is lower. Okay, look, that's rather a lot of words about this one slide, this one table, but hopefully that clarifies a few things for you. Let's move to the next slide. And here I want to say some more words about technology readiness levels. So often when you are reading the call texts for Horizon Europe work programs, especially if it's a work program maybe under Pillar 2 and one of the clusters, and there's some sort of technology development involved, you'll often read in the call text, it will specify what range of TRL levels the Commission is expecting, where they expect the technology to be at the start of the project and where it should get to by the end of the project. Now this numbering, this level scheme, it starts at 1 and it goes all the way to the 9. This is what you see in the figure. This nomenclature, this sort of scheme, categorization, it was first developed in the space sector by, I believe, by NASA, and it was a way. Obviously, you can well imagine in the space industry, they're dealing with very, very complex systems development. And it was a way in which project managers, engineers could understand at what stage of development different subsystems were at and where they needs to get to in order to then be sort of integrated and deployed. So anyway, these TRL levels, yes, it starts at TRL level 1. We're not going to read through all of them, but in essence, TRL levels 1 to 3, this is really sort of kind of research level, starting right with basic principles. When you get into sort of TRL levels 4 to 6, here it's no longer research per se, it's more development of a concept, validating, say, the concept, and then later technology readiness levels 7 to 9. This is really about deployment, where you've done the research, you've done the development. Now it's really about testing this technology, this system in some sort of real life environment, operational environment. Okay. So that's some words about TRL levels. Let's say some words now about understanding core conditions. And this is kind of bringing together several different terms, which we've just been talking about in earlier slides. So what I've done here is I literally grabbed the title from a past Horizon Europe call. You can sort of read this sort of rather long code at the top, Horizon-CL4, which is short for Cluster 4, -2023, the year, -digital emerging, -01, -50. So this is what they call a call identifier. This is a specific code that identifies this particular call for proposals. So this was one from 2023, from a couple of years ago. And the title of the call was Next Generation Quantum Sensing and Metrology Technologies. Now, if you were to go back and find the work program for Cluster 4 and for this specific call identifier, there would be probably something like at least two, possibly at least two, quite possibly three, or maybe even up to 4 pages of text describing the requirements of the call. Now, I'm not going to show all that text, but just to highlight, there are, in the call text, there'll be certain specific subheadings. The first one that you'll see will be specific conditions. So if you were to read that section, it will, under specific conditions, there'll be information where it explains about what the expected EU contribution per project would be. In other words, the amount of grant the Commission is anticipating to allocate to a project. There'll be the indicative budget. This is the total budget for that call. Maybe the Commission will be funding just one project, or maybe there may be 10, or who knows, however many. Obviously, it depends on what the budget is and what the contribution per project will be. But also in this section, specific conditions, it will tell you what type of action it is. Is it research and innovation action, or coordination support action? It'll also say some words about eligibility conditions. For example, it might say if the call is limited to EU member states, or is open to associated countries, OECD, Mercosur countries, and. Yeah, you need to find out that information. And then, yes, as we were talking about a moment ago, there'll probably be some words about what technology readiness levels are anticipated. And then there'll be some details about legal and financial setup of the grant agreements. So that's kind of one section in this call text. There'll be then another section where it's called expected outcome. And typically what you'll see is several paragraphs of text identifying the expected outcomes the proposal is expected to contribute to. So when they talk about expected outcomes, these are really what they're saying is at the end of the project, what sort of results will be created, yeah? And then another section called scope. Typically, there'll be extensive text describing the scope of the call. So there might be, usually there'll be some explicit information about what types of activity, what application area, what integration of different fields of science, technology they're anticipating. This kind of information that will be within the scope. So in this initiation phase, it's also really important to do your background investigation and research on existing projects in your field of research. The last thing you want to do is to try to prepare a proposal for a project that in essence has already been funded, that is already running, yeah. But this idea of investigating about existing projects, it's also very useful because it helps you to get a better idea about the structure of projects, the type of consortia, the partners that are in projects, how they've written their project abstracts, what sort of budgets they have. All this kind of information you can access for free through the European Commission's Cordis project database. So this is an online website. The QR code in the top right will take you directly there. Assuming you land on that page, it's quite a long page which sort of scrolls down. And if you scroll towards the bottom of the page, you'll hopefully see something like this, what is shown here on the screenshot. So hopefully you'll get to a part where it says Horizon projects and results. Now, assuming for the sake of this training, I'm going to just talk about Horizon Europe. You'd click on the button that's highlighted here in yellow. Of course, if you want to go further back, the program before Horizon Europe was Horizon 2020, and the one even before that was called FP7. But anyway, we'll limit ourselves to Horizon Europe. If you click on that button, that will take you to another part of, will take you to this Cordis project database. Now, if you want to do a sort of shortcut, the QR code on the left, that will take you right to this part of the Cordis project database, which is focused on Horizon Europe. Now, when you get there, you can play around with the filters. You can do quite sophisticated searches. In this case here, I did a very, very simple one. I'm knowing that SUSNANO is about the development of sustainable nanosensors. I thought I'll just stick in those keywords and see what comes up. So I stuck those terms in, press return. Oh, lo and behold, there are 3 results that came up. Unfortunately, I can only show you on this screenshot the first 2, but what came up top? Well, SUSNANO, our project, is listed there. No surprises perhaps there, but below that there was a project Nano Aqua or NanoAqua, application effects and fate of nanomaterials and water treatment. That's a project that just started in October last year, and it's going to be running until quite late in 2028. That may be a project, if you're interested in sustainable nanosensors, you might want to click on the hypertext link and find out some more about it. So this is just a very simple demonstration of the search that you can do. Of course, if your interest is in social sciences or some other field, use the keywords that are most relevant to yourself. Okay, still in this initiation phase. Now, those of you who watched my video, Module 1, you will have already seen, I spoke about the importance of creating a project charter. So a project charter, which is also typically referred to as a project abstract, it serves as some sort of, maybe informal contract is a bit strong, but it's a document which, if you are trying to initiate a project, a proposal, and you're, say, trying to you're looking for consortium partners and you're trying to persuade them to join your consortium, the first question they're going to ask is, well, what's your proposal all about? Well, if you prepare this project charter, this is something which would be very, very useful in those initial discussions. Explain to them what, give the basic information at the start, which they're probably interested in. So it's like an informal contract between the project team and the sponsor, and outlines the scope, objectives, stakeholders, and key deliverables of the project. I give an example here. So a moment ago, I showed you there was a call back in 2023 about quantum sensing. So let's just, for argument's sake, imagine we were interested in preparing a proposal for that call. We're an initiator. and we're trying to get other partners on board of our consortium. So we decided to create a project charter. Well, what would that be? Well, we'd obviously come up with some initial title for our proposal. It might look like something like quantum sensing and metrology breakthroughs for extreme precision applications. We would say some words about what the project objectives are, which is sort of written down here. We importantly say some words about what TRL levels we'd be working at. We would identify who the key stakeholders are, the project team, European Commission, Quantum Technologies flagship, etc. We'd say some words about what would be the expected deliverables in our project. And we would also capture in this project charter a sort of preliminary timeline for the project. So we perhaps say it'd be for 3 years, and what the main dates would be for the different parts of the project. Now, but saying that, if trying to write a project charter still sounds kind of a challenging thing to do, you struggle a bit where to get started. Well, these are some thoughts, very practical, pragmatic. They might help you to sort of get started. So anyway, the first thing I would do when I'm writing a proposal is, and I'm really expressing my personal opinion, my personal preferences. I know probably a younger generation, they're probably far more comfortable with using tablets, electronic gadgets. I'm rather old school in that sense. I like to have hard copies where I can scribble notes and doodle and what have, or underline words very easily. So it's one of the things I do is I like to print out the key pages of call text, print out the key sections of the call from the work program. I like to highlight key terms and phrases, and I keep those pages accessible on my desk for easy reference and review. I'm often like, I mean, this is not actual call text, this is, well, part of a grant agreement, but I like to have them nearby. I find that if something is in my line of view on my desk or nearby, then I'm more likely to think about it and generate ideas or improvements and so forth. So that's one thing I do. Another thing I do, written here, extract important text sections. So I copy the expected outcome and scope sections from the call text into a Word document. Well, yeah, this is, again, I don't know, is this because, if I'm really honest, when I look at the work program pages, I personally find it pretty hard to see line after line of text. Large paragraphs, I struggle to sort of read and digest that information. So what I like to do is I actually like to copy the text from the PDF and stick it into a Word document, and then actually break up all these sentences into a series of bullet points. I just find, for me, myself personally, I find that sort of easier to read, easier to sort of tick off. The other things I do is I share the call text, I distribute the relevant page of the call text to my experienced colleagues and potential consortium partners. That's one thing. It's good to obviously have some sort of brainstorming and sketching of ideas. So begin outlining your project idea on paper, or visualize your thoughts through using thought bubbles on a whiteboard or PowerPoint. Yeah, that's I've got a whiteboard nearby. I'm forever like doodling and doing thought bubbles and arrows and stuff. That works for me. Engage key partners, arrange an online meeting with the core consulting partners to review the call text and discuss the initial project concepts. I was going to say, if you do that, it's always great if you yourself or one of the people online is really skillful, let's say, using something like Microsoft PowerPoint or some similar kind of app, so that as you're talking to these partners, visually somehow somebody's helping to pull together the concept that you're developing, but they're writing the bullet points or maybe doing some bubble diagram, they're linking things together sort of dynamically as you're talking. That's really, really nice. And then, yeah, whether in a draft initial version, so write a first draft of your project's charter. So these are some ideas. Hopefully some of them might be relevant for you, could help you in this task. Yes, so still in this initiation phase, but we're kind of getting to the end of it. So words about building a consortium. So the first thing to do is you need to check carefully the call text to identify the minimum consortium requirements. So often it's the case, the call text is something like at least 3 independent legal entities from 3 different member states or associated countries. That's usually the minimum, bare minimum, yeah. But, and I hesitate a bit to read this second bullet point. If you're dealing with, say, a research and innovation action or innovation action with, say, a budget of 3 to 6 million euros, really don't be surprised to have a consortium. I mean, at the very minimum, 5 partners, very, very minimum, but quite often 10, maybe even more partners in the consortium. The thing to do is, if you're the initiator of a proposal, get together some sort of initial critical mass of partners. For example, I know 5 partners, say, and develop the project charter for them, with them, and then through this initial critical mass, use your partners also to attract other partners to the consortium, especially, I mean, I know a classic case, often the case is you'll see, say, several academic partners, several universities come together, create a critical mass, and then through their personal contacts, they attract industry partners into the consortium. Now, when you're doing this exercise, identify who will be the proposal coordinator and who will be the lead proposal writer. And I put in brackets, they're not necessarily the same person. Indeed, in an ideal world, whoever's the proposal coordinator, you would hope that she or he would also be the lead proposal writer, but often that's not the case. For pragmatic reasons, it may be delegated to some other partner in the consortium, or the proposal coordinator, she or he, especially if they're a very busy professor, they may be allocating the responsibility, for example, to a postdoctoral researcher. You have to see. But don't be surprised if they're not the same, but you clearly need to know who's who. Then, yeah, last bullet point, organize meetings with the critical mass to structure the proposal, ideally face-to-face with the whiteboard. I've written this point looking back over sort of 20 odd years or more of proposal writing. Of course, in today's age, ever since COVID, it's much more acceptable. Also, from an environmental point of view, it's much more preferable to do things online. So, Eric, have this first meeting with your critical mass of partners and kind of go from there. Still, this subject about building consortiums, some other things to think about. So, in this slide, I'm giving examples of consortia from 2 very different types of projects. The one on the left, this was a project I had under Horizon 2020. It was all about the development of organic light emitting diodes for micro displays. It was a project which got funded. It was a 4 million research and innovation action. Now, in the case of that project, it was really, and in fact, any kind of technology development project, it's very important to show that you have in your consortium partners from across the value chain, that you have industrial partners. However, whatever technology is, ask yourselves, where is value created? Where are companies selling subsystems, subcomponents, and trying to make sure that your consortium has industrial components reflecting each of those. So in our case, with the organic light emitting diodes, OLEDs, we could see that there were organizations sort of working on the materials side. In our case, we end up having Merck in our consortium. There were also companies sort of developing the stacks. Again, Merck was a company exploiting commercially that part, so we could say we had them there. But then lastly, the actual OLED micro displays. There was a French SME working in that field, and we had them in the consortium. So they were in a consortium. To emphasize this point, in the relevant part of the proposal, we had a figure like this showing the value chain and where our partners aligned in that. That's the research and innovation action. For innovation actions, you can do sort of very similar kind of figure, very similar kind of requirements. On the right-hand side, this is a very different type of project. This was a coordination support action that I had, where in fact I myself was the chief proposal writer and also the project coordinator. It was a project called Fit for NMP, and it was funded under the Horizon 2020 program. It ran for 3 years. And in essence, it was a support activity to support principally, but not only countries, mainly it was aimed at widening countries. But in fact, it was also any regions which had low participation in the nanotechnology, the materials, this parts of the Horizon Europe program. So when we wrote the proposal, we did our investigations. We could see that it was principally certain widening countries. And so what I made sure to do was in my consortium was to have a good concentration of partners from those countries, and in particular to sort of involve in research and innovation agencies or some sort of important public research institute in the field of nanoscience, nanotechnology materials from those countries. So, and to illustrate, not simply to have a list of these organizations on the front of the proposal, but to sort of visually illustrate, look, this is the coverage we've got. Created a figure like this and incorporated the logos for the different partners. So doing that, having a nice geographical spread, that may be something, an important consideration for your proposal. Okay, so look, that concludes my slides for module 2 about initiation phase. I'm going to stop at this point. We'll take a break. I'll stop this video. And a little bit later, I'll start another video recording, still in module 2, but moving on to talk about the planning phase.